Thank you very much, Your All Holiness. Maybe I should introduce myself. I'm Anders Weiryd, former Archbishop of Church of Sweden, and presently the European President of World Council of Churches. We are immensely grateful to Your Holiness for your initiatives and for your visibility and for your earnest interest in science, society, and church together, which we are many who think is extremely important for the future. You have heralded so much of this commitment, but of course these are commitments that have grown in many religious circles for many years. But you have been the focal point. Still, there are, of course, as we all know, religious people who are not very interested in worldly issues like this. But I would say to you that what we have heard from the Patriarch today reflects what is the great tendency and what is also the strong movement among the people who are educated, informed, and feel responsibility for the future of the religions. We have talked mostly about Christians. This, of course, is also a movement that we see in other religions. I was lucky enough, when I was a new archbishop, to convene an interfaith climate summit in Uppsala 2008. What we saw there was a very open-minded situation in many religions, where we see how much we share the idea, do to others what you want them to do to you. That is the core of mature religious traditions. A substantial group of people here are linked with the World Council of Churches. The World Council of Churches organizes churches with more than 500 million members, from Orthodox to Pentecostals and all of us who are in between, in a close cooperation also with the Roman Catholic Church. And therefore you should know that you have friends in the faith communities. And sometimes this friendship, I think, could be used more than it is used. It would give strength and reliability to some of your work, and it would give life and inspiration to some of our work. A group of people from the World Council of Churches have convened now for a couple of days, and in the message that is delivered from there, I would just bring out a few words. Faith communities can be powerful sources of the social capital for positive change. We underline the inextricable connections between peace with the earth and peace on earth. We also think that indigenous peoples need to be part of the entire process of consultation on climate change. All of us are basically indigenous peoples, but so many of us have lived in cultures where the links are cut. We don't realize the realities. Indigenous peoples living traditional lives still holds that connection, and that connection has to be given back to us. And therefore, indigenous peoples must form an important group in this work. For the global, national, and local engagement of faith communities and religious leaders in this task, as key influencers and sources of social capital for conversion from unsustainable attitudes and behaviors to a holistic approach to a sustainable future. That is our appeal. Now, 4 people here have listened to His All Holiness. They have perspectives of their own because they come from different situations, and I would like them to reflect upon what we have heard. And I first call upon the Archbishop of Suva on Fiji, Dr. Peter Loy Chong, Roman Catholic Church. You sit or you stand, wherever you want to be.
Oh. It is a customary thing to do for Fijian people, and that is to acknowledge people of the land. And the chiefs and the spirit of the land, especially if you are a foreigner to that land. So I sit and on behalf of the representatives of the World Council of Churches and the peoples of Oceania to acknowledge the people of the land of Iceland, living, dead, and the future generation to come. Normally in the Fijian culture, I should present a root of a cover plant in my hand, and it is a very shameful thing that I don't have that cover root in my hand. And in Fiji, we say my hands are empty. It's like I don't have the whole piece of the whole culture to be able to acknowledge. And I acknowledge that with shame. And in Fiji, we say, "Watulu sagan," asking to excuse me for the sloppiness of my behavior. It's not really fully acknowledging the people of the land, of Iceland. And then thank you for giving us the space to be bold enough to stand on your land, to which we are visitors, and to say something about the land that we call Mother Earth, that, as the Patriarch says, houses everyone. So my presentation is really to speak a little bit on indigenous references that the Patriarch speaks about. And I will ask to go back to my seat so I can read my notes. My name is Archbishop Peter Chong, and my father is a Chinese immigrant to Fiji, and my mother is a native indigenous woman. My mother's clan, we believe in totems, so we have sacred trees, a sacred animal or a bird, and sacred fish. So our sacred tree is the sandalwood, or in Fiji we call it the yasi plant. Our sacred animal is a bird. It's in Fijian it's called the ramba, which is the goshawk. And our fish is not the trout that we saw today, but the yawa in Fijian, or called the milk fish. So part of our identity as Fijians is rooted in the land, in the plants, animals, and the fish. It is an insult to speak of a totem in front of another person. In the Fijian culture, I can incur a penalty or punishment on you if you mention my totem in my presence, because it's not respectful, because it's considered something sacred, and you don't mention it in front of another person. But that goes to show how indigenous Fijians in people in Fiji and elsewhere are very connected to Mother Earth. Some years ago, my grandparents' house got burnt. Their house is made of reeds, and no nail, no roofing iron, and everything is nature. They live by the coast, and the shore is just about, maybe from here to that wall there, very close. In Fiji, it's considered civilized to live near the coast, because that's where the fish, the road is by the coast, and if you say you are from the hill land, or from the bush, you consider like a little bit primitive, because you belong to the bush. But today, that mentality has changed a little bit because of the sea level rising. Some years ago, my grandparents' house got burnt, and this time when they rebuilt their house, they chose a higher ground. Now that the news about sea level rising is going on, now I understand my grandparents decided to move their house on upper ground, because they must have noticed the sea level rising. And so for us in the Pacific and in the Oceania, the sea level rising is a reality. It means relocating your house for people who live on the coastline. Also, a concern for us in the Oceania region is because we are considered developing countries, big companies are looking around for natural resources to exploit, and that also has an impact on the ecosystem down there. Next to my mother's village recently, there was a big story there of a healing water. And people from all over Fiji were flooding to this place to either drink from this healing water or to bathe. They even opened up a Facebook for people to tell their testimony of the healing that has taken place in their lives because of this healing water. I went down there and took my two sisters, and they came back. They drank that water and they felt energized. My older sister has got diabetes. Normally she's always sleepy on the car. But on the way back, she was, bap, 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 bap. Hey, what's wrong with you, man? You look like you got some new energy today. But it's from that water.
Yes.
Lately, 400 yards away from that water is a stone quarry. Supposed to be the biggest in Fiji. And they are taking all the rocks from the river and turning it into...
See if we have your 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Turning it into gravel for tahsil. So because of that, mud is going to the coastal area, so spoiling the ecosystem, and all the fish is gone. We have a very strong way of narrative for speaking about climate change, and that is using again our culture about totemism. We regard our totems to be sacred, so we don't do anything that is not sacred that will disturb the environment of our plant or tree or bird, fish that is sacred. And when we speak like this to our people, they understand, because they consider the environment, plants, birds, sacred, and they want to respect that. The
Thank
ecological.
You very much, Archbishop.
Okay,
Thank you. I think that puts us into linking with the knowledge of indigenous peoples and the present practice of the Catholic Church. I forgot to mention, of course, also the very important encyclica from Pope Francis, Laudate Si, which really shows that there is a commitment. I think we should move on now to the suffragan bishop, Darren McCartney, in Northern Canada. We are short on time, but we started late, so we might end a little bit late, but please, your short comment.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the welcome and the hospitality that we've experienced here in Iceland. We acknowledge that. My name is, as you heard, Darren McCartney. I'm Suffragan Bishop of the Diocese of the Arctic. It encompasses three areas or three territories: the Northwest Territory, Nunavut, which was formed in 1999, and Nunavik, 1.5 million square miles, with a number of different indigenous groups there. You've got the Inuit and the First Nation people living in those areas, 49 communities. And in case you're maybe wondering where I'm from, some people think I'm Scottish. I'm actually Irish. And I happened to do a practicum back in 2002 in the Arctic, and I was invited to come back. I was ordained a deacon in the Arctic, a priest, and then latterly a bishop. But going back to 2002, the chap that welcomed me into his community, the lay reader there, a guy called Sam Kickback. A number of years after that, I learned the story that he had died. He had went through the ice. Sam was in his 70s and lived, born on the land, lived on the land, harvested from the land, using traditional hunting trails. He and his wife were coming back or traveling on one of those trails and went through the ice as a result of the global warming that we're experiencing in the north. He is one. There are many other people who have succumbed in the same way. I'm told that in Nunavut, it's going up twice as fast. The temperatures are going up twice as fast in Nunavut. I note that in the Northwest Territories, and their government papers are saying up to 4 times faster than other parts of the world. So this is something that's really important to us, and the church is a network throughout the world, and it's getting that message out to the wider church and to wider society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. I would now leave the word to someone who has another perspective. You are not a church representative, Clarisse Kela-Sibat. You are an international lawyer and a research fellow at the Stockholm Environmental Institute. But you have been in the crossroads of religious groups and climate research and lobbying. Please.
Indeed. So what am I doing here? Picking up from the Irish Canadian, I'm the Canadian Swede. And indeed, what am I doing here? I look out at the program and the whole here, and we're an unconventional cast of characters, and I think that reflects what His Holiness said, and also what we experience here is that we need to be doing things differently and talking to a wide cast of characters. I'll be really brief. I've had the privilege over the last day and a half to be part of the World Council of Churches pre-conference that's taken place, where we've discussed climate science and also how we feel about it. And as someone who is maybe more at home at the negotiations of the UN Convention on Climate Change or at an authors meeting of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I found it very refreshing to be able to talk about how things impact people and also how we feel about that and how we can work together as a community to address not just the problem, but also how it affects us personally on the inside. And I just wanted to share a short personal experience. Some months ago, I felt really run down in my work, and my colleague said, "Oh, you're burnt out. You should go home for a week and take a break." And it coincided with a scientific retreat I was at, and somebody said to me, "That's not burnout. There's a new term for that. It's called climate angst, and it's when you see, as a climate scientist, you see your daughters in that little bit of the curve of the time we have left to fix this, and you become paralyzed." And what I heard from His All Holiness, and I'm picking out a few quotes, putting them together, but it was, we need to change how we see, how we use our skills, whom we work with, and whom we listen to. And that's not, I think, just for a better outcome in the boardrooms or in the climate negotiations where some of us spend more of our time, but also to get a different perspective and maybe sustenance for the journey. And that's something I've really appreciated the last days. And maybe some of that water would be useful. Thanks.
Thank you, Clarice. Tore Jonsson, former General Secretary of the Sami Church Council in Norway, and also leading the work with indigenous peoples in the World Council of Churches. Your reflections, no, don't bring them all out, but some.
First, thank you for the opportunity to be here in Iceland. Thanks to the Icelandic people for hosting us. And also, thanks to the presentation of His Holiness and the message that he has been holding up for a long time. He was speaking about the signs of this time. And how do we pick up the signs of this time? And I think the climate change should make it very clear to all of us that certain ideologies and philosophies and theologies have failed in ecological terms. I think we need to admit that, and that actually they have been betraying us by providing us with a vision of life that has not been providing us with a true account of what kind of world we are living in, and also what kind of beings we are as humans. We need to take this into consideration. So what is the message of the ice melting and the rising water? Well, in the ancient mythologies of very many peoples of this world and even of the Bible, is that the water can represent both the very life-giving source of reality, but it can also be the chaotic force that actually makes this place not livable. So very much of both the biblical myths and indigenous myths around the world is actually that this world is created by putting everything within its cosmological limitations and borders. And we're seeing that the water is rising, it becomes a chaos, power, even though the Archbishop told that living at the shoreline was actually to be civilized. And I think the human race is actually, I think, has transgressed its cosmological borders in this system and is about becoming a force, a chaos force. And I think that is the deep message. And the message of, I would say particularly of indigenous people's traditions, is actually that this doesn't have to be like this. The human being is essentially a being taken from the soil. It's also in the scripture, but often this has been interpreted as this is something negative about the human being. I think the message of we need to reinterpret these tradition also in light of indigenous traditions, that actually this is a part of our dignity as beings to be beings of the land, of sea, and also that we are not isolated beings. Within our very bodies, it's a world of relations to the entire cosmos. So I think that is a message that indigenous traditions often have been marginalized, but we need also to take this. This is a message for our times, and so I think that will be my message now.
Thank you very much for that message, which I think is most important to all of us. And it's also very important that the self-criticism that is going on in many theological traditions is also voiced in wider circles like this. I would just, as we were starting late, and we will help you to catch up, so we will round up now, and that we will not have a continued discussion in the panel. I would just remind you of the prayer, Our Father, which many of you know. There we pray, give us today our daily bread. And then immediately comes, and forgive us our trespasses. The idea, of course, is that the resources are there. The soil is there. The possibilities are there also for a large population. But where is the problem? The sharing. That's why we ask for forgiveness. Also for being late. Thank you very much.